Before I begin the sermon this morning, I just want to say that all throughout the week, I'm praying for you. The Lord brings you to mind. I know that in this prayer time, I'm up here trying to make notes, and I hear things, and I don't get used to hearing your name all the time because the names are this long. But know that I love you, and I do pray for you. I pray God's richest blessings on all of you.
Amen.
Amen.
It's so good to be a part of a good church family. And I feel blessed, very blessed. And I just want you to know that I love you. I have been preaching this series called Families in Focus. And we have been talking about things and learning things about being a family of a purpose, a family of peace. We've talked about a family in process, which all of us are. And last week we talked about a family that models. Well, today we're going to tackle one of the most difficult issues that a family sometimes has to face. The message today is for those of you who have raised your kids in the Christian faith, but for whatever reason they may have chosen to walk away. So here's a question. Why do kids of godly parents go astray? I don't know the answer to that question. I imagine there's probably a lot of answers to that. But all through the Bible, there are many godly parents who had kids that walked away. There was Adam and Noah and Samuel and Eli and Daniel and David. They all had kids that went astray. Even today, we know many godly parents where the kids have gone a different way. And I'm not here to talk about why that happens, because I don't know why. So today what I want to do is look at a passage of Scripture that shows not why things go wrong like that, but what do you do when your kids rebel? What do you do? There are 3 stages of a typical child's rebellion, and we see all 3 of these in the story of the prodigal son. If you have sermon notes, you're welcome to use them. If they're a distraction to you, place them to the side. It says in Luke 15, verses 11 and 12, this is what it says. Jesus told them this story. A man had 2 sons. The younger son told his father, I want my share of the estate now, instead of waiting until you die. So his father agreed to divide his wealth between his sons. Here's stage 1. Stage 1 is rebellion. Rebellion. In every parent-child relationship, there's a power struggle. I remember hearing stories from my grandpa about my dad. Dad was struggling with grandpa, and there's just a struggle. I remember my kids, I struggled with my dad. There was a power struggle. I want to do things my way. And I have 2 boys. Thank you, Shana, that you haven't struggled as much with me. But I have 2 boys that we struggle a lot. There's a power struggle. From day one, the issue is who's in control. Think about it. When you're first born, when you have a child that's born, parents are 100% in control. But as the kids grow, the control shifts to the child. And kids want control quicker than we're ready to give it to them, right? Verse 12 is the classic confrontation. He said, Father, I want my share of your estate now. As if he were saying, I want to do as I please. I want to be my own boss. I don't want to pay attention to anybody else. I just want to do things my way. I'm done with this farm. I'm out of here. We don't know how old the younger son was. Maybe he was 17, 18 or so, but verse 13 says this. A few days later, this younger son packed up all his belongings and took a trip to a distant land. And there he wasted all his money on wild living. He heads off to Sunset Strip in Jerusalem. He's cruising down the boulevard in his Cadillac. And he's partying. He's having a great time doing all that he wanted to do. And the whole time he's doing this, Mom and Dad's hearts are breaking. So what do you do? What do you do when your child or your kid is old enough and you cannot control them any longer? And they say, I'm out of here. I'm going to go do my own thing. what do you do? There's a couple things in your sermon notes. First, you let them go. You let them go. I remember one time my son, oldest son, Trent, I think he was a freshman, maybe sophomore in high school, and I went up to his room. We were kind of having this power struggle thing, and I went up, he was packing his bag. I'm like, what are you doing? I'm leaving. I'm out of here. Where are you going to go? I don't know, but I'm leaving. I'm like, okay. I mean, I didn't want him to go, but I think he was just saying, hey, I'm going to go. I had to say, okay, go ahead. You let them go. The Bible says he took a trip to a distant land. I want you to notice that the father didn't chase him. He didn't chase him. He released him. From birth, I think about our kids. I know one thing that we did with our kids, all three of them, was early on in the age, we did like Mary and Joseph. We brought our kids before the Lord and we dedicated them to the Lord. We had a time of dedication because we were preparing them, teaching them, training them, that they would follow the Lord when they come to the age of accountability or the rest of their life. But from birth, we've been preparing our kids to what? To leave the house. Now, if they stay too long, I'm going to say it's time for you to go. But we're preparing them to get out on their own. But the hardest thing ever in parenting is knowing when to hold on and when do I let go. When do you let them go? Just think about this. If your son or daughter was 18 years old and they came to you and said, hey, I want half of my inheritance now, and I'm going to go out and spend it, I'm going to waste it, would you give it to them? Absolutely not. It probably seemed a little bit foolish to the prodigal's father, and no doubt he probably had a little bit of discussion trying to convince his son to stay and not to go and waste his money. But this young man was determined, I'm out of here. I have found that the tighter that you hold on to your kids, the more they're going to explode. I'm going out of here. They'll resist it if you hold on too much. One of the things that I had, I'm not a texter. Never was, but now I guess you would say I text. The only reason I text on my phone is because that's one of the ways the younger generation communicates. So I text. I remember when Trent and Mason left. Mason went to college, and I was texting good night. I was holding on every night, several times a day. I'm sending texts. And finally, Mason says, Dad, quit sending me so many texts. I was just trying to keep that connection. It's vitally important. But the tighter you hold on, the more they will resist it. So you've got to let them go. Here's the second thing. You let them make their own mistakes. I have tried so often, again, especially with my two older boys, and Shane as well, to tell them, here's some pain that I went through. I don't want you to go through this pain. And I talked till I was blue in the face, trying to get them not to experience the same pain that I did. But, there's a phrase that says, you're going to make your bed and you're going to lie in it. I've told them that. You're going to make choices. I have to let you make your own mistakes. The scripture says, there he wasted all his money on wild living. At first, everything was great for this kid. It was party time. He was trying everything that was forbidden at home. He throws out his parents' value system and he totally rejects the way that he was raised. He's wasting his life away. But do you think that his father knew that he was going to waste his money? He knew. I'm going to give it to him. He's going to waste it. Do you think that the father knew that his son was headed for trouble? Absolutely. Do you think that he was tempted to send letters of advice to his son? He wanted to. Every father wants to give that advice to help. But this father realized that there are some things that my son is going to have to learn through pain. This son was stubborn. He had to go through the school of hard knocks. It was risky, but it's the only way that this kid would learn. See, again, I tried to tell my kids, you don't have to go there. It's painful. But guess what? They went there because that's the only way they were going to learn. See, every time we take responsibility as parents for our kids, we take that away from them. We've got to let them make their own mistakes instead of stepping in for them and trying to make things better all the time. So you got to let them go, and you got to allow them to make their own mistakes. This next one is key. Let them reap the consequences. Let them reap the consequences. Let me say this. There is always a price tag for rebellion. There's always a price to pay. Look at verses 14 through 16. It said, about the time his money ran out, a great famine swept over the land, and he began to starve. He persuaded a local farmer to hire him to feed his pigs. The boy became so hungry that even the pods that he was feeding the pigs looked good to him. But no one gave him anything. What he did is he hit bottom. He hit hard times. The party was over. He's broke and he has no friends. He has empty pockets, he's empty in his life, and he has an empty stomach. Well, how do you think his parents felt? I think the parents felt pretty sorry for him. They said, you know, my kid's suffering. I can't watch him go through this. He's hurting himself. They probably felt a little bit embarrassed. You know, how can you get any lower than feeding slop to pigs if you're a kosher Jew? Every report maybe that they heard from somebody else about their son just made them want to die. It was like a knife going in their very heart. Why is my kid doing this? I remember weeping. What did I do wrong? The fact is, all of us make mistakes as parents. But here's the key. You're not the only influence in your child's life. We need to wake up to the fact that our kids make choices just like I made choices. We all make choices. They have friends I can't control. They have books I can't control. They have teachers who are influences I can't control. So it's not fair for us to blame ourselves. It's not our fault. We take a lot of false guilt on ourselves and in our lives. We need to understand that parental responsibility is the same place that the parents control. If your kids move out of your house, they're no longer your responsibility. But the great temptation is this, is when your kids hit bottom, that parental responsibility wants to jump in and intervene. We want to bail them out. We want to send them care packages. We want to send them money. We want to fly to go see them. We want to do all those things. But this father knew that nature had a way of disciplining his son that we'll never be able to discipline them ourselves. So don't short-circuit the natural discipline, the natural consequences of the choice that your children make. If they make a choice and they hit bottom, they need to reap that choice. That's how we learn, and that's hard. Because this father did not intervene, they went to stage 2. Here's stage 2. Stage 2 is about reevaluation and regret. Reevaluation and regret. It says in verses 17 through 19, it says this. When he finally got wise, when he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, at home, even the hired men have enough food to spare, and here I am, I'm dying of hunger. I'll go home to my father and say, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you, and I am no longer worthy of being called your son. Please take me as a hired man. I want you to notice the change of attitude here. The change of attitude, remember when he left, it was, give me. Now it's, Dad, will you take me? There's a difference in attitude. His attitude now is one of submission. He goes through this stage of reevaluation and begins, the Bible says he comes to his senses. He begins to wisen up and he faces facts. What am I doing? That's where it was for me years ago as a senior in high school with some of the things and choices I was making. I'm like, what am I doing? I came to my senses. It took a while to get there, but I finally did. He came to his senses and he's like, man, I'm messing up my life. And I'm slopping pigs and I've lost all my money. I've lost my food. I've lost friends. I've I've lost everything. And he woke up to the fact that his life was a mess. You know what I've discovered? I've discovered this. You won't change until you're really desperate. And sometimes our kids aren't desperate enough. They've got to hit bottom first. But others might be right where this kid was at, and then there's the point of turning it around. So what do you do when you get to this point, or they're kind of stuck, they're coming to their senses? What do? Here's what you do. You pray. You pray. Pray for your kids. You pray and pray and pray and never stop giving up. You keep praying. There's never a day that goes by that I don't pray for my kids by name and by the circumstance that I know they're going through. Every day I pray for my kids. Our kids are under the attack of the enemy every day. And we have to pray. And by the way, it's your duty as parent, no matter how old they are, to pray for your kids. Pray for them. Whether they're serving the Lord or not, whether they're in the kingdom or not, you have to pray. Keep praying for them. Here's the next thing you do. Commit them to God. Commit them to the Lord. It's comforting to me to know as a parent that when things are out of my control, they're not out of the control of God. I may not have anything that I can do to change the situation that I am in, or to change the behavior of my son or daughter. But I know that God is in control. While He's not going to force His will upon them, He doesn't force anybody. There's no forcing. But our God has the ability to guide and direct and convict, so that if they will open up his or her hearts to the Lord and they'll open up their ears, God will speak truth into their lives. So commit them to the Lord. Commit them to God. Here's the next one. This is probably the hardest one, but wait patiently. Wait patiently. Wait and wait. Sometimes it's wait and wait some more. Some of you now may be going through that waiting period right now. And some of you may have been in that waiting period for years, and you're still praying for that son or that daughter. Sometimes it takes longer for some than others. But don't short-circuit God's natural discipline. And I'm not talking about a child in grade school, but I'm talking about teenagers or college or even older who they're rebelling. They're taking a choice. I'm going to do things my way. What do? You pray, you commit, and you wait. Because the Father in this story, who represents God, He's the perfect Father. He did it right. And here's stage 3. Stage 3 is return. Return. How you handle the return of your child is absolutely critical. Verse 20 says this: So he returned home to his father. And while he was still a long distance away, his father saw him coming. Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. Remember, this is the ideal father. There's 3 things that he does, and there's 3 things here that we need to know if your child comes to his senses, if your child rises up. What do you do? First of all, you love them faithfully. You love him faithfully. When the father saw him, his son, way down, a little speck, he saw him. He was filled with love and compassion. No matter how far they fall, no matter how long you have to wait, the door is always open for reconciliation. You love them faithfully. It's a stubborn love that won't give up. You don't bail them out in advance, because they'll never learn the lesson if you bail them out in advance. You let them reap the consequences. Realize that for some kids, the only way they're going to learn is to face consequences of their own decisions. And for some, that might mean a night in jail. I remember reading words in a prison cell, a jail cell. I tell you what, that was an experience. It made me think. Who am I? Where am I going? It may mean I had to hit bottom. It may mean an unwanted pregnancy. It may mean a drug addiction. We don't like those things, but it's out of our control anyway. You must be ready so that when they do wise up, you're ready to love them faithfully. Here's the next one. Accept them unconditionally. accept them unconditionally. He ran to his son. He embraced him and he kissed him. That's a great picture. That's a picture of acceptance. That's a picture of his open arms. He didn't wait till his son got all the way home. He took off. He ran towards his son. Now notice he didn't say, there was no conditions on his love. He didn't say, hey, you smell like a pig. Go cut your hair. Go take a bath. And then I'll give you some love. No, he gave him a big old bear hug. It was unconditional love. The question you might be asking is, how can I accept him or her without lowering my standards? Well, here's the thing, you don't have to. You must understand the difference between acceptance and approval. You can accept someone without approving their lifestyle. Jesus accepted everyone, right? So much so that the religious people says he's with sinners. Jesus accepted everyone without approving of their lifestyle. And we as Christians are called on it to love everybody, to accept everyone, without saying what you're doing is fine. And I approve of it. You can accept a child in that time of rebellion without accepting or approving their lifestyle. When your child knows he or she is accepted unconditionally, it makes it so much easier for them to admit when they're wrong, because they know they're accepted. Notice in verse 21, here's the son's confession. He comes to his dad and says, Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I am no longer worthy of being called your son. See, he had practiced it. He saw him rehearse it earlier. Here's the question. Do we make it easy for our kids to admit when they're wrong? Usually when a child comes back home after a time of rebellion, there has to be mutual confession. You know, I think Trent, my oldest son, there were times I probably had more times of struggle with Trent than I did any of my other kids. And there were times that it went like this. Trent, I'm sorry. And Trent would say, Dad, I'm sorry. You know, we've both done some things wrong. And that's what you do. You say, hey, I've done some things wrong. You've done some things wrong. You love them faithfully with a stubborn love, and you accept them unconditionally. Here's the next one. Forgive them completely. Forgive them completely. If and when they come home, you forgive them completely. Look at verses 22 through 24. It says, But his father said to his servants, Quick, right now, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet, and kill the calf we have been fattening in the pen. We must celebrate with a feast. For this son of mine was dead and now has returned to life. He was lost, but now he's found. So the party began. God does not rub it in. He rubs it out. The father did not say, I told you, I knew this would happen. I knew you'd waste that money I gave you. When the son came home at that point, the last thing the kid needed was another sermon. He learned this sermon. What sermon was that? A life sermon that he went through, taught him all that he needed. Rather than rubbing it in, his father gave him a second chance. And that's what we have to do. Forgive them and allow them a second chance. I say this in conclusion. This story really should not be called about the prodigal son. I know that's not how we know it. The prodigal son is not the hero. The father is the hero. This story represents exactly how God deals with my rebellion and your rebellion. When we come to God, He does the same thing that the Father did. He gives you and I a second chance. He takes us and He remolds us and He refashions us, and He makes something beautiful out of the mess that I just made. This story has a happy ending. The son comes back home. The father did everything right. In his grief, he watched his son hurt himself. He watched him make mistakes and reap the results. The father prayed and waited and committed. When the son came back home, he accepted him lovingly, and unconditionally he forgave him completely. This story has a happy ending. But for some of us here, maybe the jury is still out for your child. You don't know how your child is going to end up. And maybe your child is having those power struggles and it just scares you to death. You think, I can't control this. You know what? You can't. Some of you may have kids right now that your son or daughter is doing things that just break your heart. And they have rejected everything that you have taught them. They've spurned your values. They've rejected your God, and they've hurt you. Maybe you're embarrassed, you're angry, and you're wondering why. My word is to you, give God your hurt. Why give God your hurt? Because of this, and I close with this question. Do you think God understands rebellious children? God understands rebellious children. But the heart of the Father is, He just wants you to come home. There's no more time for running. There's no time to just do stuff your way. But to come to God and say, I want to do it your way. I want to come home. I want to be reconciled with you. Maybe you're here this morning and you've never come to faith in Christ. Why not make that today and come home? Or this morning, we may be here and we're heartbroken because we have a son or a daughter, a brother or sister, or a mom or dad that has chosen to walk away from God. And our hearts are heavy. Would you bring that hurt? Would you bring them to the Lord today and say, Lord, I just want to bring them to you. Commit them to you. That's how I want to close this portion before we have a time of baptism.